What if your story could ignite a movement? At New Solutions Network, we merge truth, resilience, and reinvention, fueling shows that cut past the noise and light up what really matters: human potential. Police, athletes, survivors, incarcerated folks, visionaries, we bring raw, real voices the world needs to hear. Want to share your story? Want to sponsor change? Now is the time. New Solutions Network, unlocking the future, one voice at a time. Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Natanya Experience, where we break it down and we look at people who've lived extraordinary lives, doing all kinds of things that defy maybe basic parental expectation or societal expectation or otherwise. Today, I have a very special guest, an intercontinental experience today, ladies and gentlemen. We are broadcasting live from Italy with Tommy Boy, just kidding, with Thomas, coming to us, telling us a story of, well, intrigue, deception, redemption, reinvention, and all the stuff in between. Welcome, 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 Tomas.
Thank you, Natanya. Nice to be here.
All right. Thank you. So you want to just get right into above the law? Should we start with that, since obviously that's sort of the thing du jour, although you have a lot of things we're going to talk about. Want to talk about your dabble in the world of aviation and where that started and where it went.
Well, I call myself an aviator, because in the back in old days, before they figure out how to get license, pilots didn't have license, back in the, when they started flight. So I call myself an aviator, and I flew aircraft for 13 years, between 1997 until 2010, Boeing 737 mainly, without a license. So I've been a bad boy, but I've been a lucky boy, and the story is crazy story, and then this happened 15 years ago. They caught me, and I still get so many people, even more now than like 10 years ago, asking about it. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. No audio.
This is your book. You still can't hear me
Now I can hear you. Yes.
now? Okay, so this is your book, Above the Law. And look at it. And it has in this book my daughter's bookmark because she's also reading it. And it chronicles your journey from training and doing flight simulators and learning how to fly and commercial planes. We should talk, say, specifically. We're not talking about small propeller private airports. You're talking about Boeing 737s, as you said, and how you got to work at an airline for quite some time with an incredible safety and performance records. Were promoted in, and let's talk about that a little bit, what that was like for you, why you didn't have all the full credentialing that was required. I mean, I know the reason, but I'd like you to articulate it, and what it was like for you during that time up until the time that you were unfortunately told you can't do that anymore.
Yeah, maybe I was lucky, boss. I was getting tired of flying planes, but well, the reason why people ask me why did I do it, it's I did it because of passion. I had a passion since I was 8 9 years old of aviation. I went out with my father to the airport north of Stockholm. And the first time I saw all those, colorful airlines, I said, I want to be an airline pilot, not that fighter pilot or something else. I want to be an airline pilot. I want to see the world. That was kind of my dream since I was 8 9 years old. Then, life.
So you probably, yeah.
No, I mean, I was a normal kid. I played ice hockey, living outside in like a lower average middle class Swedish family. I'm the only guy. I'm the only son. I'm the child in the house. But I mean, like normal, a lot of adventures outside, and playing ice hockey. That's the kind of way I was, was a kid.
And then you were doing flight simulators and you got to some level of credentialing, right? And how did you go from there to get the job as a commercial pilot? I think it was an Italian airline.
Yeah, I mean, the process was kind of I started with Microsoft Flight Simulator. Sorry, that's good, if I can't say, but I mean, I started with Microsoft Flight. I think that's their first flight simulator that they ever did. They had even Chicago Meigs field, which doesn't exist anymore. And I was kind of very bad senior, very bad, dots, all time. This is back in the, I would say in the late 80s, or in the 80s, mid 80s. I was, doing computer gaming a little bit, training myself, playing more or less, and study a lot. Then my mother dies, and I would go spin up to about when I was 18 years old. I get some money to get a license, a private pilot license. So I do that, and I have about 35 hours flying a Cessna, 4-seat single engine, and I got the private pilot license, but that's where it stops. I did not have money then to continue. I didn't have any money to keep my hours that you have to fly every year. So, well, after 1 year, I was like, okay, forget about it. I tried to do a little bit music composing. I played around like, you're a young kid. I was about then, but a little bit more than 20 years old. But I had a passion inside. And then for certain reasons, I said, no, I really, let's see if I can become, if I can train myself. I just wanted to see how I was something for myself, if I could do it. And I know
Yeah.
that knew that I knew that there was a flight simulator, training simulator in at SAS, the Swedish Scandinavian airline system, at the airport. I basically called up there late evening. Hi, my name is Thomas. I'm a pilot, but I don't have a job. Could I come out to do some training? And the guy there, who was a simulator technician, then basically, this is in Sweden in the 80s, there's no terrorism. There's like, yeah, wow, never heard about that. Yeah, I'll come over. And, of course I couldn't fly, so that's how my adventure started.
What was it like for that first commercial flight for you
Well, I
once you were
remember the
working for the
first,
Italian Air?
the first flight was from Milan to Naples. I was a co-pilot then, and I was under kind of training with passengers. You do the same thing, but you have kind of a training captain that looks, if you're doing the things good or not. And well, my first flight is like you're nervous. You're at the first time at the new job. I didn't speak Italian there. I wanted to do my job, good job. I didn't think about other things. I wanted to do my job good, and I was very concentrated. And well, off we go, and it went good.
Amazing. And then that continued. And then you started doing solo flights and you got promoted to captain, I believe, yes? Or
Well,
along those lines?
not solo flights. Well, I flew with an airline, so I'm here now, 97. I fly, with this Italian airline, becoming a co-pilot. Then after 2 years or 1 year and a half, I see a sign in the office, and this like upgrade, do a captain course. So then I became a captain in 2000.
Right. And so now you've got a lot of flights under your belt. In terms of, and I apologize because I didn't get to this part, but
No, don't worry.
I guess I'm wondering about at one point, as we're getting into the later 2000s, that there isn't automatic technology, like that nothing's catching up about the fact that those, you know what I mean? Like, how did they actually determine that you were essentially not legally, your boxes weren't checked on the back end? How did they figure that out?
Well, it happened, 13 years later. So the first
Yeah.
time it happened in 2006 with the Italian airline, there was kind of they were not sure. They thought that my license wasn't renewed, so they let me go. I got a new job directly, and then I flew, and then 4 years later, then I got arrested in Amsterdam before flying. And basically, I remember the police. They took me. There were no handcuffs on. Like we walked into the office there in the evening or in the night in Amsterdam. And the police, aviation police in Holland said, well, Captain Salme, we think that your license is not valid. And I said, well, now I have to tell a story. Why they didn't know, they thought it was, even later on, the police thought it was me, myself, who kind of, they got an anonymous email from somebody who they couldn't trace, and that there was something wrong with my license. That's how they got to me. It was very easy. I mean, any airline that I've been working for, they could just make a phone call and say, Thomas Salme, does he have a license? And there would be no. And I would be but I was able to fly for 13 years.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. And your safety record is impeccable. So what does it make you think about, there's people who do different kinds of jobs, but they don't take other people's lives into their hands. And there's people who have all the certifications and all the boxes checked and don't do a good job on times. Maybe from human error, maybe from they have something wrong with them or what have you. I think of I can't help but think of things like surgeons or people who are responsible for safety in skyscrapers or whatever you want to say, right? Where there is some protocol that's in place to supposedly make sure that the people who are doing whatever the job is know how to do that job as best to the best of the ability that we have. But then you performed, but you didn't have that one thing. Have you had conversations like this where people are angry with you? Like, is it within, I know you're a parent, how do you talk about these things from that perspective, from people who are maybe angry?
Well, that's a good question because, first of all, I did something kind of illegal. And it's funny how people kind of, see it in different angles. I'm so far kind of lucky. I've always had kind of a people that are more kind of, yeah, people that knew me, that they know I was a good pilot. But the point where I want to come to is that my kind of, so once I passed the simulator, once I was about the airline, it was not like I just put a uniform on, here I go, walk in. I had to make tests, checks. In every 6 months, you do a check ride. You do theoretical tests. So every 6 months, I did my medical tests, I did my simulator tests with different airlines, where you have all the emergencies, and I always passed. That was the kind of moral point, my kind of, key. That was, if I
But
passed
you were
that.
trying to make sure you had all the safety measures. You were always on top of those. There's a very popular show, you must have heard of it, called Suits, and it was about the lawyer, young man who didn't actually have his law degree or something, and but he was a really good lawyer, and how it caught up with him and what that meant. But also similarly, like, he had all the other pieces, and he always tried to do right by the people he was trying to practice law with or what have you. And so for you, you're saying, I didn't have this one thing that cost money at the time when I was starting out, but ultimately you put in the time to fly, you put in the time with the flight simulators, you put in the time to get yourself rechecked and certified, as I'm just rephrasing what you just said,
Yeah.
so that you were always being very mindful of, I'm going in an airplane and I'm bringing other people in this airplane, and I'm going to make sure that they're safe, and we're going to get to our destination. And that's why you have the flying record that you do so strong, because you actually were super dedicated to the craft of aviation.
Yeah, yes, and of course, it was not like I just woke up one morning and there I am and I want to be a pilot. The things that I've been reading, studying myself. I did not have money to go to school, but I mean, I read so much things during my teenagers, so maybe I study even more than normal pilot. I don't know. But the thing is like this, I will always say, in certain areas you need somebody like me. I know that there's an airline, I don't want to mention it because it's a big airline, but I know one, he's not working there anymore, but he was head of the pilot recruitment, and they had, because of me, a kind of a in their manual say, what do we do if we have Thomas Salme case, you know and I know that the European aviation law changed, because of license, etc. So I always say, I flew 13 years, there's no people killed or hurt. That's, called luck, called whatever you call, but that's a fact. And I will say, you need somebody once every 1,000 years, 100 years, like me, Thomas Salme, because it shows that the system is not working, because you should not be able to do that. It was so easy. And in the end, I said, what the hell? Why is nobody ever checking things up,
It's interesting because, the way I got introduced to you was from our mutual acquaintance friend, Mike Dowd. And, I met him through this medium originally, and now we've come to, know each other much better as our whole organization. But similarly, whether people love, hate, or feel indifferent about him, what he showed was the cracks in the system around the law enforcement in this country, right? Who gets to decide who is a criminal, who isn't, how we compensate, but it also looks into other professions like teaching and otherwise, right? When you don't pay people for anywhere close to a livable wage or for what they're going to do for you or for what the risks are. And now laws are changed about how to protect, community and the officers. And the same thing with the airline industry, I see from your example. And I think it is important to say that, yeah, you kind of blew open a couple things that they didn't probably look at before. But I do think that, and it might be controversial, the fact that you were there because you wanted to be there so badly. You had this passion and drive from childhood that made you a great pilot. It wasn't the license that made you a great pilot. It was the fact that you wanted to learn everything you could and kind of have that control of that plane and that experience personally. That's why you were doing it. And that to me is important to say, if only we had people who actually wanted to do their jobs and maybe followed the credentials of what we're supposed to, that would make an ideal employee. And I think it's like really important for young people as they look at their jobs. In fact, the call I had right before about sometimes the thing you have affinity for isn't the thing that should be your career, or the thing that you're really passionate about. If it's out of reach, maybe look into that. Maybe there's another way to get to that place.
Exactly. I mean,
Like
I
you
mean, I
said, the
mean,
80s.
no, Natanya, one thing I want to tell you about, it's in my book as well. I was into music, so before when I was about 22, I got my license, private license. I lost it directly, and I was working actually in a video boutique during nights, and I did some music. In Sweden we are, a lot of music. You're in a rock band, like blah blah blah. But anyway, I started to compose a little bit music, you know, and I met some people from a studio, very famous studio in Stockholm, and that was the kind of the. And I said, okay, I forgot of the pilot, so I'm there going to the studio, meeting becoming my best friend, Christian and John. They were working at the Sharon Studios. This is '95. I come there and I played them. I heard that they were good. They were good producers, so I played them. My music, and they said, "Well, looks good, sounds good. Listen, what we are doing." And that was Backstreet Boys demo songs and Britney Spears. So you have heard about Max Martin, maybe that's Martin. Sandberg. He and Christian Landin, who was my best man on my first wedding. You know, what I learned from that point, 95, is that even if I had interest for music, I could hear that they were so much better. So I said, I dropped that out and I continued with my flying. So even if you have passion, but you always have to have a kind of a second or third person who can just, if you are, if you are good or not. It's not only on what you depends on yourself.
Right. It's sort of like, I want to be a singer, but I don't sing on key. Sometimes you have to maybe have a second plan for that.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And just sort of be open to, in the flying, you were accelerated, you were doing really well, and you could continue. And that was that path. But it's interesting how you've come back around to the arts now in this chapter of your life. You're back around with film and music and things like that, right? A little bit more
Well, now,
in this
you,
new chapter.
when I was kind of my father was a amateur photographer, back in the '80s. That he took me to the airport make photos, to shoot photos of airplanes, and that was in the old days when you have to develop a film, an analogic film, etc. That was kind of have a dark room. But I had the kind of passion for photography a little bit as well. So after flying, when I was kind of sorry, Thomas, you can't fly anything more. I started to make photos. I always started with photography, but I started professionally, and I shot fashion in Milan. I did Malibu Lifestyle magazine. I did soccer, professional football, and then I converted to filmmaking. With the camera nowadays, you can have a photo camera that even films. So I did my first documentary, and it's out on Netflix Europe and Apple TV and Amazon Prime in the States. So that's what I'm doing, and it's much more difficult to make films than than to fly aircraft. So it's kind of
Fly a
and I'm
plane.
I'm in the beginning.
Oh, wait a minute, wait a minute. So that's the thing. That's a quote. Hold on. It's a lot harder to make a film than fly an airplane.
Yeah,
I haven't heard that one before, so I want to repeat that.
yeah, that's great. Well, it's much harder to make a film that's good than to fly an airline.
Wow. Yeah. That gives, I think that's going to give people some perspective on that, because I think it seems quite a bit of an intellectual, mental, and physical and emotional undertaking to try and fly a 737. So, the fact that you're like, oh, but it's harder to make a movie. I'm like, wait, let's pause on that. Some people might need a minute to think about that.
Well, before you make a movie, you study a little
But
bit. I learned myself everything. I mean, the funny thing is that I wish I could have been doing film school. I wish I could have been doing, but unfortunately, once I'm above 40 years of age and I started photography filming, I was kind of, I didn't have time. I had to get money for my children, but I love my documentary filmmaking. Yeah, I do.
well, you obviously have a great sense of what makes a story. And people who don't necessarily follow the straight path, I feel like that's another thing that we're seeing more and more generationally change. It's from COVID, another big wave, right? But even as the generations change, the stats on what people say they want to be when they grow up, right? The kids, what they
Yeah,
say they want to do. And now a lot of them say they want to do things that aren't necessarily fitting in a box. Like they're not saying pilot and fireman and president. They're saying streamer, YouTube star, TikTok star, dispenser. They're picking things that were sort of on the fringe, are actually becoming the mainstream. And all of those require you to create your own world and your own environment and your own rules. So I think, you're kind of a pioneer for that, whether you want to be or not, on a lot of levels. And do you want to share the name of the documentary, just for the record
yeah.
here?
The documentary is called "Rescued from Hell: The Story of Jota Cardona," and it's a documentary about former drug dealer who worked with Pablo Escobar and Griselda Blanco. And I think he's one of the few guys who's now alive, lives down in Miami, and is free. He's not in jail. He's been spent about 16 years in prison. So he's changed his life, and I thought it was interesting to follow his kind of life. And it's easy to say don't be a criminal, but if you're coming from a poor city in Colombia, Medellin, he had no other possibility. He didn't study to school. So I mean, uh, what I think is good that they changed his life. Everybody can change their life.
Right, right. And that a lot of people that come from extreme, let's just say, conflict, whether it's war torn or poverty, whether it's um, in the streets of New York City in the 80s, or in Medellin, or, Mexico City or Venezuela. And we're hearing it now, where you basically don't have a basic sense of safety. You can't go outside and smile and look at the sunshine and flowers and then have your nice next meal. Like, that's not what childhood is like. A lot of that builds up a trauma in the mind and the body, that the world is a war zone. And so they
Exactly.
don't develop a basic sense of how to with others, and your whole reward system and survival system is on a different path. So it's not for, I feel like I'm not here to judge or say who's right or wrong. We're not part of the legal system. But if somebody, regardless of what they've done, if they want to do, and depending on your religious belief, but many religions do have space for, if you want to change, we allow for that. We allow for you to say, what are you going to do today? What are you doing today for your fellow person? How you conduct yourself in the world. And I think it's important because they're still here. These people are still alive, and we want people to be helpful members of society. And I think sometimes you have to wait, like you said, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, but till someone gets a chance to do that. But I think that's really, really interesting that you're showing kind of these kinds of stories for people to kind of think differently before they just rush to judgment. I mean, obviously the naughty bits, everybody wants the naughty bits. Everyone wants the scheme, the fight, the scandal, that's the entertainment factor. But underneath, we're all human beings. And so I appreciate the way you've brought out the human part of yourself and the story in what you've shared, with me and with the world. And I thank you for taking time
Thank you.
to tell us all this stuff. I mean, honestly, I'm trying not to be like, you're so cool.
Thank.
but it's
Well, it's
but it's
I think it's kind of because I've done something that nobody else done it. It's unique. There have been dentists. People have been practicing to be a doctor without having the right education. That's done. So if there was another guy like me, well, then probably I wouldn't be sitting here. It's unique. It's a
Exactly. Well,
crazy
that's right.
story.
So you have your own you're a category of one.
Thank you.
You anchored that. But I do think it's important that, we made light, but that I said, but what's important is in those stories, mostly what we hear. I mean, I don't want to give even words to it, but there's a story I couldn't help thinking about, a woman who went to another country. I think it was Sudan, it doesn't matter. And she not only wasn't a medical doctor, she actually caused loss of life, like at a large scale, because she wasn't actually helping the way she said she was. So there are a lot of stories about medical professionals doing these kinds of things where usually we find out about it because people die or get really hurt. The good news is in your situation, yours was a paperwork thing. You had the functional skills and you had the aptitude and the commitment to do your best in that job. And I think that's what makes this a little bit uncomfortable for some people, honestly, because it's not that easy to just be like, well, he broke the law. You know what I mean? Whereas like you were really trying to make sure you didn't hurt anyone. And I think that's important to denote anyway, at least that some people,
Well, I
don't quite
I, wa-
approach
I
it in
was
the
very
same way.
lucky
But
as well.
you're in that.
No, I was very lucky as well with the once I got caught. You forgot to tell that. What was I sentenced to prison? No, I was fined $2,700. That's it. And even the prosecutor who was kind of against me. I think it was on CBS. There was something, a quoter, and it says, Thomas, Captain Salme was one of the best pilots out there. So I mean, even the prosecutor who was against me was like, well, it was not that bad anyway. So I think a good story has to have passion. It has to have, intelligence, and you have to have a bit of luck as well. I've been lucky, and if I've been lucky, then I want to do maybe good things for other. I'm working on a documentary soon ready called Railroaded in Reading. I will tell you, the Railroad in Reading, it's about a guy who's been in prison for 27 years in Reading, Pennsylvania. Innocent guy. And I have great interviews there. I'm working together with some people from Georgetown and DC. Very intelligent. So that's soon ready, and I'm trying to help other because I've been lucky.
Yeah, that's something I would love to learn more about. So yeah, Reading, PA, I pass by there quite a bit, so I know the area. And so the wrongfully incarcerated is a whole other arm, right?
I know.
People's whole lives and generations of and communities are affected by that. So thank you for taking that on um, to tell that story, because I'm sure there's sadly, a lot of other people that could
Yeah,
probably relate to that. And people need to understand what's going on because they're kind of hidden out of society and then nobody knows. So it's very easy
exactly.
to just enjoy your life without awareness of it. So thank you for shining a light there. Well, I thank you for joining us today. This was really exciting. I can't wait to see more of your endeavors and get further along through the book. Like I said, I don't want to lose my daughter's bookmark in there, but I appreciate you being willing to talk to us and share how, what this
Thank you,
has been.
Natanya. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm sure we'll talk again soon.